Hi folks, this is video number 93 and the title is Bats and a Bass. Bats can be a little scary to some. There has always been the story about them getting in your hair. Of course, rabies is always a concern. Having them show up in a strange place can be startling. One night, fishing by lantern light, I noticed a gob of seaweed hanging on my line about 2 feet from the end of the pole. I reached out to pull it off. When doing so, you would think you'd get the feeling of cold and slimy. Nope, I got warm and fuzzy. A bat had landed on my line for some reason. Perhaps because the light was drawing bugs. It did not take long for me to get rid of that guy. Another night fishing trip was to the rocks just to the west side of the Tunkhannock Bridge. When the river is at normal height, they are a good flat platform to fish the river at night. I didn't take a lot of stuff to that location. Just a couple of poles and a small blue metal tackle box and a lantern. The bank to get down to the rocks is fairly steep, and that's about enough stuff to negotiate the slope. This trip was my last fishing trip for the season. When I got home, I put my rods in the rack and the tackle box on the shelf in a special closet I built for my stuff. In the late winter around March, I get out my gear and get it ready for the coming season. I have a diamond stone to sharpen my hooks, and I open my reels to check the gears and add new lube if needed. I may change line too. Well, it came time to check out my gear once again. I got my little blue box down from the shelf and set it on the paper-covered kitchen table. I opened the box and could not quite figure out what I was seeing. Not right away, anyway. All my hook containers and lures were open and out of place. In the bottom of the tackle box was what appeared to be a ball of gray cheese. The ball was totally covered with hooks and lures. You guessed it. It was a bat. Apparently got into my box for some reason when it was sitting open while I was fishing on the rocks with a lantern. I inadvertently trapped it when I closed the lid. It must have panicked sometime after I placed it in the closet, and it flopped around, knocking open the hook containers and rolled into the lures as well. What a terrible way to die. I actually felt bad for that bat. Now for the bass story. I was fishing along the road down at Thomas's Pond. On the far side of the pond, I noticed a good-sized swirl about 10 yards or so from the dam. I had seen action over in that area a few times, and I just watched for a while. The pattern was being repeated. I had no place to be for a change, so I jumped in the truck and went up to the house and grabbed my hip boots. I went back to the pond and parked in my normal spot and put on my hip boots. I grabbed my medium ugly stick and hoofed it up the road and out behind the chicken coop. I crossed the small patch of grass and carefully walked over the beaver dam and into the field that bordered the far side. The edge of the field was pretty soggy. That's why I usually didn't wander over there. This rather large bass was working hard along that side. I positioned myself about halfway around that side. The water surface was mostly clear on that side of the pond. There was only one little scraggly bush with about 5 little branches sticking up about 1.5 feet above the water surface. I was watching the swirls as the bass slowly made its way toward me. After a couple minutes, I figured the bass was close to my casting reach. I lobbed a 4-inch black jointed jitterbug out to the area I figured the fish would be in. I raised my pole tip to get the line off the water. This move eliminates any telltale added motion in front of the lure. I twitched the jitterbug and waited a few seconds and then started to slowly retrieve it just fast enough to make a gurgle. I only retrieved it about 10 feet and the water erupted. The fish broke the surface and went about 3 feet in the air. It was a dandy, probably 7 or 8 pounds. The battle was on. The bass gave me a good fight and broke the surface a few times. The last time it broke out was right next to that scrubby little bush. The bass landed on that bush, made a few flops, and fell into the water. My line went dead. Looking out at the bush, there was my jitterbug. As it turned out, it was hopelessly snagged, and I had to break the line. As I stood there rehashing current events, I came to the conclusion that the bass had a preformatted escape plan. There was only open water at least 200 feet in any direction from that scrubby bush. A couple of jumps and it headed for and jumped in the bush, thus snagging my lure and escaping. Essentially, I was outsmarted by a fish. It aggravated me so much I didn't fish that area again the rest of the year. Well, that concludes the story about the bats and a bass. You heard a little snoring in the background about halfway through this story. It was Jake. He's laying on the bed here sleeping. The bugger started to snore. Anyway, as always, I wish everyone all the best.